Well, when I was a child, I was terrified of storms. I trembled and wept. No amount of calming or cuddling could comfort. Finally, my father decided to take me into the storm, hoping that I might experience it differently. He took me to our screened porch, where I cowered under his arm. And he talked me down from the edge of my terror with a conversation about a conversation. "Watch for the lightning, Janet," he whispered. "The lightning is asking a question. Then listen to the thunder. The thunder is answering the question." "But why does the thunder have to speak so loudly?" I asked. "Because the thunder is not always satisfied with the lightning's question. The thunder has questions of its own. If you listen carefully, you can tell what the thunder is saying. Sometimes the lightning and the thunder disagree, and so they butt heads, fighting like you and your brother. Crackle, boom! At other times, the thunder is satisfied with the question, and you can hear this long, low rumble of laughter. To this day, I have to stop what I'm doing and listen to the storms. Not because I am terrified, but because of the way my father concluded our time on the porch. After stirring my curiosity with a conversation between lightning and thunder, he said, "The lightning and thunder know that you are listening. I'm sure that they have a question for you as well." Thus, having hooked my imagination, he asked, "So, Janet, what did the lightning and thunder say to you today?" My father gave me the gift of being thunderstruck. Our theme this Lent is the dark wood. What does it mean to be in a dark place after the suggestion from the first line of Dante's Divine Comedy? At the midpoint of the path through life, I found myself lost in a wood so dark, the way ahead was blotted out. We can, wake up someplace that we had no intention of going. We can find ourselves disoriented, groping among the shadows, wondering how we got there. The familiar touch tones are sometimes missing. Most unexpectedly, however, the promise is that these places of darkness can become places of new life. Places where God's presence is announced by flashes of intuition and an awareness that we are not alone. In ancient times, the voice of God was associated with lightning and thunder, as the passage from Job suggests. We can be thunderstruck without actually being struck by thunder. Have you ever experienced a sudden flash of insight that rocked your whole world? Or perhaps you experienced that sudden flash when you encountered your first love or your life partner, or when a child was born. Or perhaps you went out on a casual walk into the woods one day, only to return a different person. Why do we describe these moments as sudden flashes and seeing the light when there is actually nothing to see? And why do we claim that they rock our world when the actual world around us remains stable? Like the ancients, we too are forced to convey interior phenomenon, what goes on in here, using external metaphors. What the ancients were trying to describe, which we moderns are often too sophisticated to realize, is how God speaks to us. When the ancients spoke of God flashing lightning and chasing it with claps of thunder, they meant that the voice of the divine sometimes comes through momentary flashes of intuition that trigger sensations that reverberate within us like rolling thunder. Oof. God answers Job out of a whirlwind. And there's no better word to describe what has taken place in Job's life than a whirlwind. Look at the events that have transpired in his life. All of his children have died. He has lost his home and business. He lost his health. His body is disfigured with sores. It all happened in rapid fire succession, just like a whirlwind, just like a tornado. And out of the whirlwind, Job asked God, why? And out of the whirlwind, God thunders. Job is not prepared for this. After all Job's accusations and threatening to take God to court, God arrives on the scene and without mincing words declares, "Gird up your loins like a man." In other words, God says to Job, "Stand up before me because I have something to ask you. Who is this one who dares to speak? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? Are you the one that made the sun rise this morning?" For those of us that think that God is docile and soft-spoken, here is a God taking on Job with bombastic, thundering rhetoric. When God answers with questions, echoing, rumbling, thundering questions. Where are you? Who are you? What have you done? This story is an ancient parable, and it isn't in the Hebrew Scriptures by mistake, by accident. This story exists because our ancestors in faith knew there was danger in allowing a too cozy relationship with deity to develop. For everything we humans get our hands on, we massage, manipulate, manage, and muscle into submission. So why would it be any different if we humans were to get our hands on God? We have seen the wisdom of such counsel. It's why we always begin our worship with expressions of God's grandeur. Didn't we open our service this morning by singing, God of the sparrow, God of the whale, God of the whirling stars? How does the creature say, ah? How does the creature say praise? But I'm not content to leave it there. I find myself needing both the praise and the thunder for a pair of personal reasons which only now are becoming clear to me. The dark wood of retirement in 4 months has caused a rumbling of God's voice. So, if you will, kindly hear me out. First, I need to sing of God's grandeur and listen to God's thunder as a way of clarifying whether our primary desire is that God serve us or lead us. I am 65 years old. That makes me at least middle-aged. While far from the scrap heap of once useful clergy, it has been a long time since anyone referred to me as that bright young light. I have pretty much assessed my strengths, accommodated for my weaknesses, and gotten comfortable with who I am. while I am sufficiently restless so as to never be completely settled, I do understand how easy it is for routines to become ruts, for ruts to become caskets, and how tempting it is to cozy up to a God who will take care of me, companion me, fulfill me, forgive me, and allow my needs to set the agenda for our conversations, all the better that I remain comfortable and secure. But that's not the way I got here. That's not the way we got here. We did not get here simply because God said yes to us, but because we also said yes to God. We did not get here by simply saying, "Oh God, come into our lives," but rather, "Oh God, take our lives." We did not get here by simply making God welcome, but by submitting ourselves to following. We, beloved, have been thunderstruck. A pair of lay people talking about their new clergy person, their newly appointed clergy person, said one, "There is no question that this pastor will love us as we have never been loved." To which the other one responded, "But when the time comes, will this pastor be able to lead us where we have never been led?" Janet and St. Luke's needs God the leader every bit as much as it needs God the lover. Speaking for myself, at 65 years of age, I am reasonably certain that I am loved. Truth be told, I haven't spent 10 minutes in the last 10 years wondering whether God loves me. What is less certain is that I know with clarity that I have listened to where God would have me go. Second, I sing a song of grandeur and listen for the rumbling voice because I need to turn over large chunks of my world to a God that I can trust with confidence. At 65 years old, I'm at the top of my game. I am healthy, I am competent, I do not lack for education or experience, I know how to get people moved, I know how to get things done, I know how to effect change. But every day I realize that what I bring to the world's need, what I bring to the church's need, what I bring to your need is literally a drop in the bucket as to what is necessary. It is a strange feeling to have reached a point in life when both my sense of confidence and my sense of inadequacy are higher than they have ever been. Gosh. In that great book title, Philip Watson paraphrased Martin Luther by reminding us to let God be God. Let God be God. And on more days than not, I find myself saying, what choice is there? But I need to believe that God is equal to all that I dump in God's lap. John F. Kennedy once said that the thing that surprised him most about the presidency once he got there was how little power he actually had to do anything. I read Kennedy's statement 30 years ago, and I am only coming to understand it now. For even at the height of my powers, I can't do much of anything either. To be sure, I can choose which side will receive the weight of my oar, but this boat that we call history, the story, seems increasingly beyond my capacity to steer or beyond anyone else's capacity either. Most days it seems as if we have settled for steerage by extremes, which may explain why we keep going around in circles. So handing over more and more of it to God seems like the only reasonable alternative. Woody Allen once quipped that God wasn't dead, but was merely an underachiever. Now, to some, that was irreverent. To others, funny. But it's a fear that many hold. Is God up to the challenge of today? Therefore, it is imperative that in my search for God, in my prayers for this community and for our country and our world, I end up where Job does, face to face with a God who is bigger than I am, knows more than I know, and whose immensity and intellect I can somehow trust. In fact, it is probably more important at this time in our life together that we trust God than that we love God. A few years ago, I found myself in the co-pilot seat of a twin-engine prop plane piloted by a man named Greg. The plane's name was the Stutter One, and it was transporting Mel Tillis and his band to a concert in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, Greg, the pilot, a friend from my congregation in Nashville, knew how much I loved country music and country music stars. And so he invited me along. So cool. And for reasons not entirely clear to me, Mel Tillis suggested that I sit up front. Co-pilot is the best seat in the plane. Or it was until I realized I didn't know the first thing about flying or landing that plane. I mean, what if Greg suddenly grabbed his chest and pitched forward? What would I do? So I watched everything that Greg did, just in case. I asked some very pointed aeronautical questions, just in case. I even tried on Greg's headsets so that I could sense a connection between the ground and us, just in case. But there was no way I could learn enough, fast enough. That plane had only one pilot, and it wasn't me. But as it turned out, there was no cause for worry. Greg was an experienced pilot with a good record and a good heart. I even noted that when the waitress took the beverage order, Greg said, "Make mine tomato juice." I smiled knowing that I was in the hands of a prudent and responsible man. I was also in the hands of a friend. But whether Greg was a friend or a stranger was largely irrelevant to my flying experience. Sitting in the co-pilot seat, I found it did not matter whether Greg loved me, liked me, or merely tolerated my presence. What mattered was Greg's ability to fly the plane. When I was traveling multiple years ago in our region on behalf of the United Methodist Church, another Greg, he was a funeral director by trade, gave me one of the nicest compliments I have ever received. I had just finished speaking at his church in Alamosa, down in the San Luis Valley. As we were walking back to the car, Greg said, "You know, I love to watch a craftsman at work. I don't care whether it's a meat cutter or a bricklayer or another funeral director or someone who does what you just did. I can't get enough of it." Which brings us back to Job. Filled with doubts, filled with complaints, filled with uncertainties, his head swimming with God and God's ways, his hands bloody and raw from beating on the gates of heaven, refusing to leave without an audience with holiness. What does Job get? Answers? No. Assurances? No. Affection? Not really. Just unrestrained lightning and wondrous thunder and great things that we cannot comprehend. What Job gets for all of his trouble is the privilege of glimpsing a craftsman at work. Sometimes I find myself wanting to believe that as Job listened and watched from his place in the wood, that he finally tiptoed away, closing that gate to heaven quietly behind him, satisfied that even if he, Job, was still in the dark, at least God knew what God was doing. Someone is on our side. We are not alone. Thanks be to God.